bitterness and discontentment, guilt and shame, abuse that we've suffered from the hands of others. Like that kind of stuff drives us into the hands of things that will numb our pain, but ultimately those numbing agents that only numb and never heal steal the life away from us. I think an addiction is anything you do that you don't want to do that you can't seem to stop doing. It's kind of a game changer to think of addiction in those terms, right? Anything you do that you don't want to do, that you can't quit doing is an addiction. And whatever that may be in your life, there's a good chance you have spent a long time justifying it and minimizing it and telling yourself, yeah, I could quit if I really wanted, but I don't really want, or maybe later, just not yet, and it's not hurting anybody, so And what I want to do this morning is press pause on that and take a look at what God has to say about who he created us to be, and about how some of these fake fixes that we use to numb our pain actually undercut the identity he wants to give us and the purpose we're meant to live with. And I want to talk about how he says we can be set free. And so if you have a Bible this morning, you can crack it open to the book of Isaiah, chapter 44. If you don't have a Bible, you can follow along with the words on the screen. If you need a Bible, or your kids do, we have a whole bunch of them back in the Next Steps area. They're free. We love it when they disappear, so please snag one before you leave today. But Isaiah is a prophetic book that's written to the kingdom of Judah in the middle of a deep rebellion against God. And starting in chapter 40, Isaiah has this whole section where he talks about idolatry, about all the things God's people are trying to replace God with, the things they're setting on the throne of their lives and hoping can make them fulfilled and happy and at peace. These things that they're replacing God with in Isaiah 44, God kind of tells us what idolatry does to the human heart. Check it out. It says, all who make idols are nothing, and the things they treasure are worthless. Those who would speak up for them are blind. They are ignorant to their own shame. Who shapes a god and casts an idol which can profit nothing? People who do that will be put to shame. Such craftsmen are only human beings. The carpenter cut down cedars, or perhaps took a cypress or oak. He let it grow among the trees of the forest, or planted a pine, and the rain made it grow. It is used as fuel for burning. Some of it he takes and warms himself. He kindles a fire and bakes bread. But he also fashions a god and worships it. He makes an idol and bows down to it. Half the wood he burns in the fire, from the rest he makes his god, his idol. He bows down to it and worships it. He prays to it and says, "Save me, you're my God." They know nothing. They understand nothing. Their eyes are plastered over so they cannot see, and their minds are closed so they cannot understand. No one stops to think. No one has the knowledge or understanding to say, half of it I used for fuel. I even baked bread over its coals. I roasted meat and I ate. Shall I make a detestable thing from what's left? Shall I bow down to a block of wood? Such a person feeds on ashes. A deluded heart misleads him. He cannot save himself or say, is not this thing in my right hand a lie? And I get it, to our modern minds, the concept of like chopping down a tree, using half of it for firewood and half of it to make a god that you think will save you is just ridiculous. Like we read that, we're like, really? Someone did that? That's going to be the dumbest human alive. Like you cook bread over it and then you worship the other half? I don't know. But the thing about this passage is that what Isaiah tells us from God's perspective, like from a God's eye view, all that stuff that we use to heal our hurts and to give us a hit of dopamine is just as stupid as using half a tree for firewood and believing the other half is your God. And I think there's something in there about what idolatry looks like and what idolatry does to us that I want us to understand. And the first one is that a lot of these things that become idols are not bad things in and of themselves. Like a block of wood isn't bad. It's a really good source of fuel for a fire. It's just a really bad source of hope for your future. And when it comes to the things in our hearts that we chase, these habits that we get caught up in, it's not that sex or stuff or entertainment or shoes or cars or computers are bad. They're really great things. They're just really bad gods. See, idolatry happens when good things become God things. And then our hearts get locked up. When we start trying to replace God on the throne of our lives with these other things because we're convinced that they can heal our pain, when all they can ever actually do is numb it. And we start settling for less when we aim our lives in the direction of the gifts rather than the giver. And we start worshiping created things rather than the creator. And that actually profoundly changes some things within us. For starters, when we let good things become God things, it steals our identity. We begin to struggle to actually believe we are who God says we are. Because we look at our lives and our schedules and we can't really define ourselves any longer outside of that thing that we're chasing, that we're convinced we need. And then we get real hostile real quickly when anyone threatens our little habit. Because a threat to our addiction is a threat to our identity. And we're like, no, you can't take that away. That's the thing that I need. And that happens to us on an emotional level. It happens to us on a spiritual level, but it also happens to us on a physical level. Like, without getting too much into the weeds and the science of it, our bodies have some really powerful chemicals in them. Like, when you try something for the very first time, you're basically walking through the woods in your brain. And there's this thing called delta phos-B, which is basically like a little Boy Scout troop that helps cut a trail. It cuts down all the weeds and the branches and the stuff that's in your way. And if you're a nerd like me and you're like, what? I want to learn more about that. There's some great articles on Google. There's also some like doctors and DMU students in here. I'm sure they can explain in detail how splice variants of regulatory proteins actually work. For today, Boy Scout crew, right? You're like, hey, I want to learn this. And then your little Boy Scout crew cuts a path. And you're like, hey, I did that once. I'm going to go again. If you're like, hey, I'm sad, I should shop. You cut a shopping path in your brain. And if you walk that path again, it eventually becomes a really well-worn footpath. And the more you walk it, it becomes a road, and ultimately it becomes a superhighway because the neurons that fire together, wire together. It's neuroplasticity. We can literally cut new channels in our brains. It's the reason you could hop on a bike and ride it even if you haven't ridden a bike in years. Or you could pick up an NES controller and dominate Super Mario 3 even if you haven't played it in over a decade. Like, give me 15 minutes. I'm in 2 coin heavens, 2 warp whistles, 10 extra lives, and I'm in World 8. All the middle-agers out here are like, yeah, the rest of you are like, I don't even know what you're talking about. But, like, it happens, right? It's why if you play a sport or an instrument, practice matters. Our brains are built to get better at things the more often we do that. And here's the thing with our addictions. Every time some situation in our life inspires us to hop on that highway of addiction, we build a new on-ramp. We're like, man, I had a really bad day at work. I'm going to crack open Amazon. The next time you have a bad day at work, your brain's like, should we open Amazon? And ultimately, you end up in a spot where every time you have a bad day at work, you're on Amazon finding something for yourself. You're like, man, I'm really frustrated relationally. I'm going to look at my computer screen or my phone or something like that. We do it again and again and again. Hey, I saw a billboard. I saw an advertisement. On-ramp, 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 on-ramp. The catch is it's really difficult for us as human beings to build any sort of exit ramps. And so we accumulate on-ramps, and we rarely, if ever, are able to exit that superhighway until we get to the destination, which is a big old hit of dopamine. A lot of the happy chemical that makes us feel better for a little bit. And often what drives us there is hurt and frustration. Addiction is kind of a second order problem. This other stuff that we talked about, bitterness and discontentment, guilt and shame, abuse that we've suffered from the hands of others, like that kind of stuff drives us into the hands of things that will numb our pain for a little bit. But ultimately, those numbing agents that only numb and never heal steal the life away from us because they're good things we've allowed to become God things. And we've placed the trust in them to heal our hurts and fix our problems. That is a misplaced trust because they cannot do that.